Welcome to level 3. This is a tricky section, so let's get started. 2 nitrogens to 2 hydrogens to 1 oxygen. 1 nitrogen to 3 hydrogens to 2 oxygens. Again, if you have hydrogen and oxygen in your problem, I would leave those towards the end. So let's start with nitrogen. 2 nitrogens on the reactant side, 1 nitrogen on the product side, coefficient of 2. Now, because I have oxygen as a diatom, I'm going to leave the oxygen for last. I'm going to start with my hydrogens. 2 hydrogens and 2 times 3 is 6 hydrogens. So I have to multiply this 2 hydrogens by 3. Now I have 6 hydrogens and I have 6 hydrogens. I still have 2 nitrogens and 2 nitrogens. Oxygen. On the reactant side, I have 3 oxygens, and on the product side, I have 2 oxygens. This is where it gets tricky, because you cannot multiply 2 by a whole number to get 3. So the rule of thumb is, when you get an odd number, double your existing coefficients. So my 3 then, we're going to make it a 6, and my 2, we're going to make it a 4. Let's check to see what that does to our problem. If I start with my 2 nitrogens on the reactant side, I have 2 nitrogens, and over here, I now have 4 nitrogens. So I need a coefficient of 2. So I now have 4 nitrogens on both sides. My hydrogen should now already be balanced because 6 times 2 is 12, and 4 times 3 is 12. Remember, my problem area was with oxygen. So now when I look at oxygen, I have 6 times 1, which is 6. So what do I multiply 2 by to get 6? It is going to be 3. And my ratio here is going to be 2 to 6 to 4 to 3. Now, if you've watched previous videos from me, we've always written them off to the side. But one thing I want to expand upon is that these guys need to be in low whole number ratio. They can't be reduced. If for some reason you did this problem and you got 4 to 12 to 8 to 6, I could take each of these numbers and I could divide them by 2, and that would reduce it to 2 to 6 to 4 to 3. This lower whole number ratio is the correct answer. But what we're going to find when problems get a little bit more difficult, we start working with bigger numbers, and sometimes we just got to go back to and just check. Are they in lowest whole number ratio? Now, number 2 is probably the trickiest one here on the paper. So we have 1 nitrogen, 3 hydrogens, 1 nitrogen, 1 oxygen, 2 nitrogens, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. Again, I try to leave my oxygen and hydrogens towards the end, so let's start with our nitrogens. I have 1 nitrogen plus 1 nitrogen on the reactant side. On the product side, I have 2. So 1 plus 1 is 2. That matches the 2. Now I have hydrogen and oxygen to work with next. Okay, what do we want to do here? Neither one of my oxygens or hydrogens are by themselves. So let's just start with the hydrogen, because I see that I have 3 hydrogens here on the reactant side, and I have 2 hydrogens over here on the product side. They don't match. And I have an odd number over here. So what I said before is if you have an odd number, let's make it even. So let's put a 2 here. Now I have 2 nitrogens and I have 6 hydrogens. Well, let's take care of the hydrogens because that's what we were focusing on. I have 6 hydrogens, and over here I have 2. So what do I multiply this guy by? Well, I have to multiply it by 3. Okay. But you're saying to me, Mrs. Parsons, we're really screwed up because my nitrogens here, I have 2 nitrogens plus 1 nitrogen, and that gives me an odd number. That gives me 3 nitrogens, and over here I can only have 2 nitrogens. Well, you are correct. So we have to make that odd number even. So I have 2 nitrogens plus 2 nitrogens is 4. I now have to multiply this nitrogen by 2. So let's check my nitrogen and my hydrogens. 2 nitrogens plus 2 nitrogens is 4 nitrogens. 2 times 3 is 6 hydrogens. 3 times 2 is 6 hydrogens. My problem area is going to be my oxygen, because now I have 2 oxygens on the reactant side, but I have 3 oxygens on the product side. Well, what did we say when you have an odd number? When you have an odd number, let's double our coefficients. All right, so let's do this. Let's double the first guy. Let's make that 4 nitrogens. Let's double that. Now I have 4 nitrogens plus 2 nitrogens, which is 6. Okay, yeah, that's going to not make that work. That's going to be a 3. We're going to have 3 times 2, which is 6. Let's check our hydrogens. We have 4 times 3, which is 12. Over here, that 3 is going to have to become a 6. We have to double it. 6 times 2 is 12. All right. Let's double check. 4 nitrogens plus 2 nitrogens is 6. 3 times 2 is 6, 6 nitrogens. 4 times 3 is 12 hydrogens. 6 times 2 is 12 hydrogens. We have 2 oxygens. But now over here, we have 6 oxygens. 2 oxygens to 6 oxygens. Oh no. I gotta make my oxygens match. So this 2 has to become a 6. Because now I have 6 oxygens and I have 6 oxygens. But what does that do to my nitrogens? So if I come over here, now I have 4 nitrogens plus 6 nitrogens, and 4 plus 6 is 10. So in order to get 10 nitrogens, my coefficient here has to become 5. And my ratio for this guy is going to be 4 to 6 to 5 to 6. 4 to 6 to 5 to 6, and its lowest whole number ratio. All right, number 3 is a combustion reaction. I know it's combustion. We'll talk about it next week again. This is a hydrocarbon. It's carbon hydrogen. It's reacting with oxygen gas and it's producing carbon dioxide and water. It's fire all over here. All right. This is a little bit tricky. Remember, if you have hydrogen and oxygens on both sides, let's start with all the other elements in the formula first, which only leaves me with carbon. Here I have 2 carbons on the reactant side, and over here I have 1 carbon, so I need a coefficient of 2. I have oxygen as a diatom, so I'm going to leave this guy for the end, and I'm going to go with my hydrogen first. I have 6 hydrogens, and over here I have 2 hydrogens, so I need a coefficient of 3 to get them to match. That leaves me with oxygen left to go. I have to do 2 times 2, which is 4, plus 3 times 1. 3 times 1. So 4 plus 3 is 7. And there's no way that I can multiply 2 by a whole number to get 7. So when you get an even number with an odd number, the trick is to double the coefficients. So the 2 is going to become a 4, and the 3 is going to become a 6. And let's start over. I now have 2 carbons, but over here I have 4 carbons. So that means I have to have a coefficient of 2 in front of C2H6. I have 4 carbons to 4 carbons. I now have 2 times 6, which is 12 hydrogens. And over here I have 6 times 2, which is 12 hydrogens. Let's look at our oxygens. I still have 2 oxygens on the reactant side. Here I have 4 times 2, which is 8. And here I have 6 times 1, which is 6. So 8 plus 6 is 14. I multiply 2 by 7 to get 14. So my ratio is going to be 2 to 7 to 4 to 6. I have another combustion reaction. It's called a hydrocarbon reaction. It can contain oxygen in it as well. But again, we have oxygen and hydrogen on both sides, so the trick is to start with all the other elements besides them, which only leaves me with carbon. Here I have 2 carbons. I have 1 carbon, so I need a coefficient of 2. I don't have oxygen necessarily by itself over here, but it's still the diatom, so I'm going to take care of my hydrogens first. Here I have 5 plus 1. 5 and 1 is 6 hydrogens. So over here, I'm going to put a coefficient of 3 so I can take care of my 6 hydrogens. All right, so when I look at this side, I have 2 times 2, which is 4 oxygens, and 3 times 1, which is 3. So 4 plus 3 is 7 oxygens. Well, I have 1 oxygen here. So that 1 oxygen cancels 1 oxygen from over here. So now that 1 oxygen canceling one of the 7 leaves me with 6 oxygens. So what do I multiply 2 by to get 6? It is 3. So I can see I have 2 carbons, 6 hydrogens, 6 hydrogens. I have 1 plus 6, which is 7, and I have 4 plus 3, which is 7. And my ratio then is 1 to 3 to 2 to 3. And the last one. Carbon dioxide and water produces acetylene gas and oxygen gas. Start with my carbons first. 1 carbon to 2 carbons, so I need a coefficient of 2. I have oxygen as a diatom, so let's start with my hydrogen first. 2 hydrogens to 2 hydrogens. We're good. Here I have 2 oxygens plus 1 oxygen, and over here I have 2 oxygens. So again, I have an odd number over here. My odd number is on this 1, so I need to double it. If I double that, right, now I have 2 oxygens plus 2 oxygens, which is going to be 4, so I would have a coefficient of 2 for 4. But we have an issue because we changed our hydrogens here, so let's start over. I still have 2 carbons, 2 carbons. But now I have 4 hydrogens. 2 times 2 is 4. So I have to have a 2 here. So 2 times 2 is 4. But that messes up my carbon. Now I have 2 times 2, which is 4 carbon. So that means I have to have 4 carbon over here. So I cannot have a coefficient of 2. It's got to be 4. Let's start over. 4 carbon, 4 carbon. All right, let's go to hydrogen. 4 hydrogen, 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Let's check my oxygen. Now I have 4 times 2, which is 8, and 2 times 1, which is 2. So 8 plus 2 is 10. So in order to get 10 oxygens over here, I have to replace this with a 5. And my coefficients here are going to be 4 to 2 to 2 to 5. Let me know if you have any questions or need further help.